and the winner of 2018 PC party leadership and the next Premier of Ontario is Doug Ford, 6,202.
Doug Ford was declared the victor after a turbulent convention north of Toronto. The announcement was delayed several hours after Ford's main rival, Christine Elliott, challenged the outcome. This political drama may yet end up in court. But for now, Ford is getting straight down to work to prepare his party for a June 7th trip to the polls.
Many of the party members feel like they've been let down with this process.
Delays, drama, and a challenge from within. The climax to the leadership race of the Ontario Progressive Conservatives just about had it all. Doug Ford eventually emerged the victor from a chaotic convention north of Toronto. But the political theatre may be far from over. Ford was declared the winner after 3 rounds of voting. The 4-candidate contest ended with a battle between him and Christine Elliott, who had run for the leadership not once but twice before. Ford won by just over 150 votes. It's that wafer-thin margin that Christine Elliott is now challenging. She alleges voting irregularities and is refusing to concede defeat. CBC's Mike Crawley was at the convention up all night and announced Ford's win long before the official call. He walks us through how this amazing drama unfolded.
John, everything seemed to be smooth until about 3 o'clock, which was when the announcement was supposed to be made. And then we started to hear these rumblings. Why isn't the announcement coming? Lawyers got involved, and as soon as you hear that, then you know there's trouble. And so basically what happened is senior people from the campaigns were locked in a room. We were told even that their cell phones had been taken away from them so they couldn't communicate with the outside world. So the other senior people on their campaigns who were not in the room were asking me what was going on. I started to find out from my sources a couple hours later that Ford had won. Elliott was close, that the margin was half a percentage point or so, and that Elliott was disputing the results. And so we reported that, but there was nothing official coming from the party, not even any explanation as to why the delay. Around 7 o'clock, 4 hours after we were supposed to get the announcement, we heard this from the chairman of the party's Leadership Election Organizing Committee.
Unfortunately, we do not have access to the hall any longer. Members, I ask you to please go home to await the results. We cannot stay here. Media cannot stay here either.
So go home, effectively, is what he had to tell them. So literally they started clearing the room, stacking the chairs. You could see the garbage all over the place, the lights come up, and it just looked awful for the party because they wanted to have the big spectacle of the balloons dropping and everybody up on stage cheering the new leader, show of party unity, and in kind of prime time with all of the networks there. They're kicking the media out here, so we're not even really going to be able to show what actually happened. So this was not the spectacle that the party wanted to put to the people of Ontario. Several more hours passed. Finally, we hear there is going to actually be an announcement. It's a very low-key announcement. It's in this really drab room. Very few people there. The only other candidate other than Doug Ford that comes in is Tanya Granick-Allen. And even Doug Ford's victory speech was pretty low-key. Here's a significant part of Doug's speech.
We have a lot more work to do before the next campaign. We have a lot to do in a very short amount of time. But I promise you this, I will get our party back on track. We will put a platform forward that speaks to every Ontarian.
So there it is. Doug Ford, the brother of the late Rob Ford, the controversial, some say infamous mayor of Toronto. He's run the family business for years, Deco Labels. His father, of course, an MPP provincially for the Conservatives. But Christine Elliott, within 150 votes, appears to be contesting this. What do we know about that? So
just after midnight, Christine Elliott put out a statement. We hadn't seen anything of her. And the statement said that there have been serious irregularities in the vote. She said that thousands of members have been assigned to incorrect ridings. This is a moderately complicated thing, just very briefly. They weight the ridings equally. And so Elliott's saying that there were a number of people, and when this race is determined largely by geography, that could actually have an influence on what the result is. We don't know that for a fact, but what we do know is that the party appeals process listened to this argument and concluded that whatever discrepancy there was would not have altered the outcome. So that party appeals decision is final. So what that says to me is that this thing is probably going to court.
So, in fact, you talked to a campaign co-chair, Christine Elliott's campaign co-chair, around 5 p.m., as you were breaking news all day throughout this. But he seemed to pretty strongly imply, even at that early hour, that a court challenge was not out of the question. It's
absolutely not been ruled out. Christine Elliott's talking here about investigating further. The party says it has investigated. So, again, it seems to be that her only option for recourse is the courts. And then what is that going to do to this party? Christine Elliott had pitched herself as the unity candidate, that she was the person who would bring this party together after Patrick Brown's resignation, after all of the ups and downs, roller coaster ride of this leadership race. She pitched herself as the person who was best placed to bring the party together to go into this election campaign, which starts really soon. The campaign officially begins in a couple of months. Election day is less than 3 months away. And now it seems that Christine Elliott is the one who's saying it's not over yet. She's continuing to contest this, even though Doug Ford has been announced as the leader. She's not conceding.
88 days away, Ontarians go to the polls on June the 7th. Briefly, Mike, one last question in all of this. How does this party go into an election campaign like this? A margin of only 150 votes for the winner of the party, if only from the standpoint of the attack ads that may come from the Liberals and the NDP. How does this party move forward?
Yeah, you certainly are already seeing that the messaging coming from the other parties, the Liberals and the NDP, is that this party, they can't organize a proper leadership race. How can they run the province? But they're also starting to attack Doug Ford. And I think that's going to be the real key thing, is if Doug Ford is confirmed as the winner, how does he pivot? How does he come up with a platform? Because they've thrown their platform out the window. And how does he take on Kathleen Wynne in that election? Because she is a seasoned campaigner. Although she's highly unpopular, anything can happen.
Well, we've heard from the top Conservative in this country. That would be the leader of the federal Conservative Party, Andrew Scheer, who has tweeted out his congratulations today. Let's bring up his tweet. He is saying, best wishes to Ford Nation on being elected the new leader of the Ontario PC Party. Looking forward to working together on Conservative solutions to the challenges facing Ontarians. Of course, both of these men are hoping to unseat the Liberals that are either at Queen's Park or on Parliament Hill. But it won't be that easy, of course, for Doug Ford at this time, because the main candidate who was running against him, Christine Elliott, former MPP, longtime Conservative member, and 3 times has run for the leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, is not willing to concede at this point. In fact, released a statement saying that the margin of error is too narrow between the two candidates, about 150 or so points or votes as they're being described. She says she won the popular vote and she won the majority of ridings. So because of how technical and complicated the system was in selecting the leader, she's not ready to say you're the leader yet. And in fact, she wasn't in the room last night when he made his victory address. But that's not the case with Caroline Mulroney. She's issued a tweet saying that she's congratulating Doug Ford on becoming the leader. She's looking forward to party unity, and she says she's going to be out there in Ontario knocking on doors to make sure that Conservatives are elected. Of course, the other candidate, Tanya Granick-Allen, was on the stage with Doug Ford and was quite supportive of him in the midst of the whole campaign. But one very interesting Conservative voice we had to bring up, John, is the man who held that job just a few weeks ago. Let's bring up the tweet from Patrick Brown, who was removed from his position. He says, congratulations to Doug Ford on winning the Ontario PC leadership tonight. We are all behind our new leader and focused on our common goal of defeating the disastrous Wynne Liberal government. Let's get Ontario back on track. So it was interesting to hear from him, because it was altogether possible that had he stayed in the race, he would once again be the leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservatives. But that's not the case. He is throwing his support behind Doug Ford.
Okay, so that's the reaction from the Conservatives, Progressive and otherwise. How are the other parties responding?
Well, not surprisingly, we are hearing from the Liberal Party of Ontario. They've issued a statement. It is scathing and very critical of Doug Ford specifically, saying that the candidates of the options, he was the most conservative, and his selection represents the Conservatives making a shift to the radical right. They say Doug Ford specifically represents making abortion an election issue, corporate interests over workers, religious extremism, and cuts to healthcare and education. We've not heard specifically from Kathleen Wynne, who is the Liberal Premier of Ontario, waiting for that. We have heard via Twitter from Andrea Horwath, who is the leader of the NDP. She has issued her congratulations to him. But we're waiting to see when all of this settles this morning how they are going to respond. It'll be interesting to hear what they have to say.
Rob is telling me these stories are untrue, that these accusations are ridiculous, and I believe him.
Now, that was Doug Ford defending his younger brother, the late Rob Ford, back in 2013. Doug was a major figure in the crack smoking scandal that surrounded Rob when he was mayor of Toronto. Many saw Doug as his brother's protector, but his critics said that he was a bully and an enabler. The Rob Ford crack scandal put the family in the international spotlight, but the Ford's political history goes back for decades. Their father, as we mentioned, Doug Ford Sr., was an Ontario MPP in the 1990s. He helped lay the groundwork for the family's political power base in Toronto's western suburbs. So for more on what's next for the party, we've joined now by Ontario political analyst Robert Fisher. Doug Ford, thanks for joining us, by the way, Robert.
Thank you, John.
Doug Ford, leader in quotation marks, because there is controversy. Has he won? Has he won definitively? And what happens now?
Well, as Mike Crawley just told you, Christine Elliott is, challenging these results. I wouldn't be surprised, quite frankly, John, if she took this all the way to the court. Even though in social media this morning, there people were saying, well, cry me a river. You didn't want this whole convention delayed by taking it to the court, and now because you didn't like the result, you may end up in the court. The problem for Doug Ford is that he wakes up this morning. Yes, he is supposed to be the leader of the Ontario Conservative Party, but the unity that everybody spent all day yesterday talking about with great passion, from Vic Fideli, the interim leader of the party, to Jason Kenney, who came all the way from Alberta to talk to this party, that said you have to be united, otherwise you're not going to be able to hold it together. You have a former premier, two in fact, Mike Harris and Ernie Eves, telling the party, forget about those polls because anything can happen in an election. And then suddenly the party decides, let's go to the anti-establishment side, not the safe side with Christine Elliott, and see what happens. And I think there's a lot of question marks this morning and today, and there will be in the days and weeks ahead, about where this party is headed and where Doug Ford will take this party.
Still, you've got to admit that out in the hinterland, outside of the major urban centers, that there is an anti-establishment conservative sentiment. Is Doug Ford going to be able to speak to that effectively?
In small-town rural Ontario, Ford's nation was essentially sort of West End and East End Toronto, but the vote result shows that it spread beyond that. And in fact, when you hear the message that he's given to people, they like what they hear. They like that their taxes are going to be cut. They like the fact that he's going to cut provincial spending. He's going to end so-called political corruption at the legislature. And he's going to give the grassroots of the Conservative Party a voice again against the so-called elites. That is what is resonating out there with a lot of people. And it could ultimately, if he can expand a little more of the Ford Nation, that might in fact help him greatly in an election which, as you well know, John, is all about change.
As you say, about change, because there is a wildly unpopular Liberal premier in charge at the moment. Still, though, as played out over hours in front of the cameras last night, the Progressive Conservatives, arguably a party in chaos. How do they sell that we can run the province argument when it doesn't look like they can run a leadership campaign too smoothly?
Whether this is a story that has legs, as we say in this business, for a few days or a few weeks, who knows? But the fact of the matter is that yesterday was a disaster for the Ontario Conservative Party. The mere fact that Doug Ford had to speak with mostly family members around him when he had his big moment that he'd been declared leader is an indication that things just went off the rails and stayed off the rails. Now he's got to bring that party together. He will start immediately to bring people into his tent. But whether he can do that or not, who knows? Christine Elliott is the wild card in this whole thing and may well determine just whether, in fact, Doug Ford stays on as Tory leader.
So that's what the party has to do. What does the opposition, meaning the Liberals, the governing Liberals, and the NDP have to do in this campaign to pick away at the chinks in the armor?
They have to move very delicately. For me, this is kind of a reprise of the Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump election. Remember, Hillary Clinton went after Trump supporters as the, as the unbearables, or some sort of word that she used. Attacking his base was a disaster for her. So the Liberals and the NDP in Ontario have to be very careful how they approach Doug Ford and not to alienate the people who are now supporting him. So it's going to be a delicate ride. I think, as Mike Crawley told you earlier, you can't not write off either Kathleen Wynne or Andrea Horwath, two very experienced politicians who have been through this provincial dance before, and bring that experience to the leaders' debate and to the campaign itself. It's going to be a tough go for everybody, and we'll see how it ends. But a lot of Tories are really counting on Doug Ford to pull this one off. The polls indicate that people want to change. He may be the change that people are looking for.
We're going to spend the coming weeks getting our party in fighting shape, because the people of this province are ready for change.
It was a really wild evening, unlike any I've ever seen. I've covered a lot of provincial and federal leadership contests, and I don't think I've ever seen one that was so tumultuous. It wasn't that it was disorganized. I don't think it was badly organized. The problem was that this dispute over the ballots, Christine Elliott basically wouldn't concede, still hasn't conceded, and so the Doug Ford supporters and Mr. Ford himself were left in limbo for many, many hours, as were hundreds of Tories who paid $50 each to go to Markham and drink overpriced crappy beer. So it was not the kind of great showcase for the party that I think that many had hoped, many progressive conservatives had hoped.
So not the showcase, a potential disputed winner. Where do things go next for the party?
Well, I mean, as you heard earlier, I think it can only go to the courts, because if it goes anywhere else, because the party says this is the result. The Leadership Elections Organizing Committee said that this is a result, so it's certified in their view. Christine Elliott does not accept that result. I don't blame her. This is, remember, her third time at trying to run for the leadership. She lost in 2015 to Patrick Brown. She lost in 2009 to Tim Hudak. Her late husband, Jim Flaherty, lost the two previous occasions. So that's 5 times that this household has been defeated in the last 5 Tory leadership races. So that's a very difficult thing for that family to swallow. But the rules are the rules. Yes, Ms. Elliott apparently got more votes. Yes, she won more ridings. But under this complicated points system, Mr. Ford appears to have won.
Do you think she'll push ahead with that challenge, though, or do you think in the cold light of day she may decide, you know what, our only chance of winning is to unite and move forward?
Well, this is the thing, John. I don't know. I mean, last night there were a lot of emotional people there. I had Tories pulling me aside, grabbing at me, physically grabbing at me, saying, put in your story that I'm leaving this party now that this guy is the leader, because this is a disgrace. So it's not a united party this morning by any stretch of the imagination. Christine Elliott is very, very popular in that party. Clearly not as popular as she thought, but she has the most caucus support. She had about 20 people in caucus supporting her. Mr. Ford had 2. So that's a difficult thing for the parliamentary caucus at the legislature. The other thing is that we're going into an election that starts in 2 months. The election is June 7th, but the writ drops May 9th. So the Liberals got the opponent that they wanted. They wanted to run against Doug Ford because they wanted a contrast with Kathleen Wynne. Kathleen Wynne is not very popular according to public opinion polls, but the party's program is popular. People do like the minimum wage hike. People do like the pharmacare program. People do like the free university tuition. But Ms. Wynne is dragging her party down. So I don't know if it's going to be an offset. Mr. Ford has no program to speak of other than he is going to clean up government or stop the gravy train at Queen's Park, whatever that means. And I think that his musings during the leadership may be problematic for him in a general election. He was talking a lot about abortion. He was talking about sex education curriculum. He was talking about how it would be relatively easy to make $4 billion in cuts to the $141 billion Ontario budget. It's not easy, because if it were easy, someone would have already done it.
So for more analysis, we've reached Angela Wright. Now, she's a Conservative strategist who's worked on both the federal and provincial level. She was there at what was supposed to be an announcement last night until all the party members and the media were asked to leave. So, Angela, give us a sense of being in that room as it all unfolded.
So early on, everyone was very excited. All the four camps and their candidates were waiting in the room, and there were a lot of members at the back, and the media had their cameras already. And 3 o'clock came, and no announcement, and then we waited for many hours, and people became increasingly frustrated, due in large part to the fact that the party wasn't providing anyone with any information. And so there all these rumors started circulating on social media about what was happening. You know, was it a first ballot win? Was there issues with the voting system itself? And so people were just very confused. And then finally, just after 7 o'clock, the party came, and when they announced that they did not have any results, people began booing and got very upset.
So this was a situation where you had 3 female candidates, 1 male candidate, vying to lead a party up against 2 strong female leaders of the other 2 parties, the NDP and the Liberals. So what do you make of the fact that it was a male, that it was Doug Ford, that was chosen by the party?
You know, it's interesting. Even though it was Doug Ford who was chosen by the party, Tanya Granick-Allen played a very instrumental role in him becoming leader. She was really effective at mobilizing social conservatives, and then she told her supporters, go ahead and support Doug Ford second, and then don't put anyone else on the ballot. And so I suspect that a lot of people did just that, and that was then able to help Doug Ford to win on the 3rd ballot. And really, this is not just Doug Ford being the only man, but Doug Ford was also, along with Tanya Granick-Allen, they were the 2 most vocal anti-Patrick Brown candidates. And so in a large part, this is likely due to a lot of people who were very upset with Patrick Brown, whether it's because of the allegations or whether it's because they were social conservatives and they were in large part frozen out of the party by him. And so it is a male leader, but it's not just, a male leader being chosen over 3 female leaders. It's a male leader and a lot of what he stood for, and then Tanya Granick-Allen and her supporters also throwing their support behind him.
Still chosen by that wafer-thin margin, that 150 or so votes. Can the party unify, not just from the far right, as maybe we're seeing here, but the other elements, the Mulroney supporters, the Christine Elliott supporters, in the next 88 days to form a unified front to win an election?
That's a very good question. And one thing that's interesting is that because it's Christine Elliott, and Doug Ford and Christine Elliott are longtime family friends, and so if there's anyone who could get Christine to stay in the fold and get her supporters on board, it would be Doug Ford. And so it'll be interesting to see how that personal relationship plays out into the kind of political drama, and whether or not she will actually go to court to kind of take on her personal family friend. And then in terms of kind of social conservatives at this point, they feel like they're back into the party. They feel like they've been listened to when it comes to the sex ed issue. And so at this point, it'll really be trying to get everyone just behind Doug Ford, and can Doug Ford really be effective in getting all of these supporters? It's hard to tell at this moment whether the party will fracture, but if he is able to get Christine Elliott back on side and back on his team, then he'll have a very good chance at being able to unify the party.